You won't believe how I gave my heart, my trust, and my life to a man who only saw me as a bridge to his dream. A husband I prayed for turned out to be my biggest test. But Allah never lets the oppressed suffer in vain. This is my story. The dreamer and the deceiver. I always dreamed of marrying someone who loved Allah, someone I could build a home with. When I met Idris, he seemed perfect. He praised my hijab, he quoted the Quran, and he said he wanted a wife who would raise righteous children with him. He said all the right words and my heart softened. Everyone said he was lucky to find me, but I felt I was the lucky one. Marriage and migration. We married quickly. Just a small nikah with close family. A few months later, he started talking about moving abroad. He said we'd have better opportunities, that we could both study Islam and work to support our future children. I believed him. He applied for a visa with my help, I sponsored him. I was so excited when we got approved. I left everything behind, my family, my job, my community. I followed him with a heart full of love. A change in the air. The first few months were sweet. He bought me gifts, took me to Islamic lectures, even brought me tea in bed. But slowly, something changed. He stopped praying with me. He stopped mentioning Allah. He came home late. I'd ask, "Where were you?" He'd reply coldly, "I'm not a child." I started noticing the way he looked at other women. He began criticizing me. My hijab. My modesty. "You're too backwards," he once said. "You need to modernize." The paper trail. One night, I overheard a call. He didn't know I was in the hallway. He said to someone, "Yeah, it's done. She got me in. I'll give it a few more months, then I'll bounce." My heart dropped. I sat on the floor, shaking. I couldn't breathe. The man I made dua for. The man I loved. He used me, for papers. Brokenness and sabr. I confronted him. He didn't even deny it. He just said, "You knew what this was." Then he walked out. I fell into sujud that night and cried until far. I asked Allah, was I nothing but a transaction? But that's when my healing began. Rebuilding with Allah. I moved into a sister's apartment. I found a community of Muslim women who reminded me of my worth. I went back to memorizing Quran. Every ayah felt like a balm to my wound. People whispered. Some blamed me. Some said, "Didn't you see the signs?" But I stayed silent. Allah saw everything. And that was enough. His fall. 6 months later, I heard news. Idris had been arrested. Immigration issues. His papers were revoked. Turns out, he had tried the same trick with another sister, but this time, she wasn't silent. He was deported. The man who mocked my prayer mat, now had no ground to stand on. Allah sent me better. 2 years passed. I healed. I rebuilt. Then came Hamza, a quiet, kind brother from my local masjid. He didn't come with poetry or promises. Just character. Respect. Deen. He asked for my hand in the most honorable way. Today we raise our children with love, Quran, and peace. Old wounds, new reflections. Every now and then, a memory of Idris would creep into my mind. Not out of love but disbelief. How could I have fallen for such a lie? But then I'd remind myself, even the Prophet was betrayed by those close to him. Betrayal doesn't define us, our response to it does. I journaled often. It became my private therapy. Every page filled with du'as, tears, and hope. And each time I read them back, I saw how Allah had carried me. Community and courage. I started mentoring young sisters who were preparing for marriage. I didn't tell them my full story, but I warned them, don't marry words. Marry actions. Their eyes would widen when I spoke of red flags. I wasn't bitter. I was honest. I wanted to be the sister I never had, when I was in love with illusions. A test of the heart. One day, Idris sent an email. A long apology. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. That he was in a dark place. That he wanted forgiveness. I read it. Closed it, and prayed. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him. But because I had healed. And I didn't need to open a wound Allah had already closed. A stronger me. I started giving small talks at the masjid for sisters who had been divorced or heartbroken. The turnout was always more than expected. Women cried, shared, hugged each other. We weren't broken women, we were survivors. Believers. Fighters. Ramadan of renewal. That year, Ramadan felt different. Deeper. Every tearaway felt like it was stitched with the pain and healing I'd been through. I made a dua in the last 10 nights. Ya Allah, let my story be a means of healing for someone else. That very month, one of the sisters I'd been mentoring got engaged. She said, I prayed for a husband after I heard you speak. And I got him. The final closure. Months later, I saw Idris in a masjid, quietly sitting in the back. He didn't see me. But I saw him, alone, hollow. I whispered, Ya Allah, guide him. I had no anger left. Just dua. From pain to purpose. Looking back, I realized that if I hadn't gone through that storm, I wouldn't be who I am today. Idris tried to use me as a ladder, but Allah turned me into a light. Now I speak. I share. I uplift. Because every scar I carry has become a source of strength. One sister came to me crying after a lecture. She said, I was about to marry someone like him. Your words saved me. I cried too. My pain had become someone else's protection. That's when I knew, even the ugliest chapters of our lives can be ayahs in someone else's guidance. Raising children on truth. My husband Hamza and I teach our children to value truth. I tell my daughter, you are not defined by who loves you, but by how you stand when they don't. Every night before bed, we read Quran together. And I silently thank Allah for giving me what I never asked for but desperately needed, peace. The surprise visitor. One evening, while teaching a halakha, a woman waited at the back. When the gathering ended, she came forward, it was Idris' mother. My heart stopped. She hugged me and whispered, I heard what he did. You didn't deserve that. But Allah honored you. Please forgive us. The dignity of silence. I never shared my pain publicly. I never exposed him. And now, years later, that silence became my strength. Even his family respected it. Sometimes, dignity isn't in speaking, but in surrendering it to Allah. The dua that changed it all. That night, I made sujud like the first time, broken but grateful. And I whispered, Ya Allah, I thank you for the storm. For without it, I would have never known how strong you made me. Night of forgiveness. It was the 27th night of Ramadan. The masjid was packed, the lights dim, the hearts heavy with longing. I had come with my daughter, holding her little hand as she sat quietly beside me, watching me cry in sujud. That night, I forgave Idris, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want my heart to carry his poison any longer. I whispered his name in dua, and asked Allah to guide him. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it freed me. The silent victory. They say victory comes with patience, and I saw it unfold quietly. No fanfare, no dramatic moments. Just small things. Peace in my home. Joy in my children's laughter. A husband who respected me. And the ability to sleep without tears. I realized Allah had rewritten my story better than I could ever write it myself. The letter I never sent. One day, I wrote a letter to Idris. I never sent it. It said, you broke me, but I healed. You used me, but I grew. You tried to erase me, but Allah wrote me back into a better story. I don't hate you, I pity the choices you made. And I pray you find the guidance you once mocked. It sat in my drawer, not as a wound but as a witness. When pain becomes power. I was invited to speak at a women's conference about faith and betrayal. I stood before hundreds of sisters, my hands trembling, my heart racing. I began, betrayal is not the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of the most beautiful chapter. As I spoke, women wept. One sister hugged me and said, "You told my story." That day, I learned that my deepest pain had become my most powerful message. The woman in the mirror. I looked in the mirror one morning and truly saw myself, not the broken girl, not the abandoned wife, but the woman who survived. A hafidha. A mother. A community mentor. And above all, a servant of Allah who had walked through fire and come out purified. The return. Years later, Idris came back to the country. He attended one of my open events without knowing I would be there. When I walked into the hall, our eyes met. He looked away. I didn't. I greeted him with salam. Because my dignity wasn't tied to his shame. After the event, he approached me. "I'm sorry," he said, barely above a whisper. I nodded. "May Allah guide us both." And I walked away. That was all that needed to be said. Motherhood and meaning. My daughter once asked, "Mama, why do you cry sometimes after Salah?" I smiled through tears. Because Allah gave me back everything I lost and more. She kissed my hand and said, "Then I'll always make dua for you, Mama." It hit me then, my dua had become my legacy. My child was my answer. From wife to warrior, I began writing a book. Not just about Idris, but about every woman who had been used, discarded, and left to pick up the pieces. I titled it, "She Wasn't Weak, She Was Worshipping." The book sold out within weeks. Sisters from around the world wrote to me, saying they finally felt seen, heard and healed. When Allah elevates. At an international Islamic summit, I was honored with an award for resilience and community support. As I stood on stage, I remembered the night I had cried on a prayer mat, feeling worthless. Now that same woman was being celebrated, not because of her pain, but because of what she did with it. Full circle. One evening, I was teaching a halakha. A young woman asked, "How do you know if Allah has truly helped you heal?" I smiled and replied, "When you no longer want revenge. When you no longer feel bitter. When your heart prays for those who broke you, and your life is filled with peace instead of pain." That's when I knew, Allah hadn't just turned the tables. He had rewritten my destiny. During one Ramadan, I stayed up for Laylatul Qadr. I cried more than I had in years. Not because I was still hurting, but because I finally felt whole. That night, I begged Allah not for revenge but for elevation. I asked for Jannah. For peace. For a heart that couldn't be shaken again. Her letter to Allah. I wrote a letter to Allah. Not a formal dua. A raw, unfiltered note. Ya Rab, you know what I've faced. You know what I lost. But you also know what I've gained. I don't want what I had. I want what you've prepared for me. I folded the paper and placed it inside the Quran. Reunion with a stranger. At a Quran class, a sister kept staring at me. After the session, she approached and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" She was Idris's cousin, one who had mocked me before. "I used to think you were weak. But now, I wish I had your strength." It reminded me that our silent sabr often speaks louder than angry words. The proposal. Years later, someone approached me for marriage. A good man. A father. A teacher of the Quran. I was scared, not of love but of trust. I prayed istikhara for days. Then I saw a dream. I was standing by a calm ocean, reciting Surah Al-Fath. That was enough. Starting over. We married quietly. No social media, no elaborate events. Just Nika in the masjid and a house filled with dhikr. He never asked about my past, only about my hopes. It felt like Allah was telling me, see, I can give you better. When he knew my story, he found my book one day and realized it was about me. I feared he'd pull away. Instead, he kissed my forehead and said, "You're stronger than most men I know." That day I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt safe. The masjid lecture. I was invited to speak again, this time about healing after betrayal. A young sister asked, "How do you move on after being used?" I said, "You don't wait for an apology. You don't wait for justice. You walk forward holding Allah's hand. That's how." When he read my dua, I left my letter to Allah in the Quran, the same mushaf my daughter now used for hifd. She found the paper. "Mama, did you write this?" "Yes," I smiled. She hugged me. "Then I'll ask Allah to answer all of it for both of us." The return of Idris, again. Idris reached out one more time. This time, he wanted to be friends. I didn't reply. Not out of hate, but because my peace no longer allowed unnecessary access. Healing doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it means distance. Public and private. In public, I was a speaker, a mentor, a role model. But in private, I still had moments where I broke. And that's okay. Healing is not linear. Allah sees the sujud no one else does. And that's where the real strength lives. Dawah through pain. I received a letter from a sister in prison. I read your story. It gave me hope. I started praying again. That's when I knew, the pain I thought had ruined me, was actually planting seeds in hearts I'd never even meet. I wrote a sequel. I wrote another book, After the Fire, Living with Peace. It wasn't about him. It was about what comes next. The joy, the lessons, the tests that don't stop, but become easier to bear with faith. A new baby. Allah gifted me a baby girl. We named her Rayhana, after the Prophet's companion. Her name means fragrance. She was the sweetness after all the bitterness. I held her in my arms and whispered, "You came from Sabr. You are my joy." My daughter's question. "Mama, what if someone hurts me like that?" she asked. I hugged her. Then remember, Allah is watching, and if you stay close to Him, no pain will ever destroy you. Eid without him. Years after Idris left, I celebrated Eid with my new family. It was simple, new clothes, sweet dates, and peace. That's all I ever wanted. And now, it was mine. Sisters gathering. At a halakha, a sister shared her heartbreak and said, "I thought Allah abandoned me." I replied, "Sometimes, when people leave, it's Allah removing the storm so the sun can finally rise." My son's graduation. My son graduated and gave a speech. Everything I know about strength, I learned from my mother. He cried. I cried. The audience cried. That day I realized, my test became my children's shield. My mother's dua. My mother once said, "Allah will reward your tears." She passed away years ago. But her dua lived in my heart. Every peace I found, I knew her prayers were part of it. When Allah is enough. At a retreat, I spent time alone in nature. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful." Because when you've seen what Allah can do with broken pieces, you stop mourning the loss and start praising the replacement. Full closure. I stood in front of the mirror one last time and smiled. I forgive it all. I release it all. I choose joy. I choose Allah, because sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living a life so peaceful, they wonder how you're still standing. Ya Allah, for every sister still healing, give her peace that no human can offer. Replace betrayal with blessings. Turn every tear into elevation. And write her story in your mercy. Amin. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment with Amin, and share it with a sister who needs healing. Subscribe to this channel, because sometimes, your test becomes someone else's hope. Channel, Sovereign Secrets Series, Stories that Heal the Heart.